Welcome back to English with Apurva. In today's episode, we will learn new English vocabulary through a very emotional and motivational story. Listen carefully, understand the meaning of every new word, and try to repeat after me. This story will help you improve your English and your confidence. Now let's begin. There was once a quiet boy named Evan, and although the town he lived in was silent, frozen and colorless, the boy himself carried a restless spark in his heart. The town lay in a valley surrounded by mountains so tall that the sun rarely climbed high enough to be seen. The sky stayed dark and heavy, almost like a thick blanket pressed against the world. Children grew up never knowing warmth. Adults forget laughter. Streets stayed empty. Shops stayed closed, and the entire town moved like a slow shadow, alive but not truly living. Yet, in the middle of this stillness walked Evan, small, thin, and unnoticed, carrying a dream larger than anything the town had seen in decades. From the time he was little, he had been fascinated by light. While other children played indoors beside dim lamps, Evan sat by his window, staring at the cold grey sky, trying to imagine what true sunlight must look like. He collected every story about the sun that he could find. Whenever a traveler passed through the town, he would run up to them with a notebook in his hand and ask, "What does sunlight feel like?" Some laughed softly, thinking he was just a curious child. Some gave him patient answers. Some ignored him entirely. But Evan wrote down everything. He wrote down every description, every metaphor, every faint memory someone shared about brightness, warmth, or golden light. Slowly, these walls built a small universe inside him, a universe far brighter than the world he stood in. As the years passed, his curiosity grew into determination. The town believed nothing could change, but Evan refused to surrender to that belief. He told himself again and again that if light existed somewhere, then it could be brought here too. He didn't know how, he didn't know when, but when he believed, and the belief, as small as it is, can be a dangerous thing inside a dark place. Evan began reading every book he could find. Physics book with torn covers, old encyclopedias, missing pages, handwritten journals left by forgotten travelers. He learned the meaning of the words like radiance, reflection, thermal energy, evaporation, atmosphere, and refraction. He practiced pronouncing them as if saying these words out loud could summon what they described. People in the town whispered behind his back. Some said he was foolish. Some said he was wasting his time. Others said he was strange because he preferred books over company. But Evan didn't stop. Even when he felt lonely, he carried on. Because whenever he closed his eyes, he almost could picture a golden glow behind the darkness. But there was one voice that kept him going, even after she was gone. His grandmother. She was only one who believed in him. Every night she would hold his cold hands and tell him even the smallest person can create the biggest change if they never stop trying. She said it with such warmth that Evan felt as though her words themselves were a kind of sunlight. And when she passed away, the world felt colder than ever. But her voice stayed inside him, soft and steady, like a flame that refused to die. Years later, when Evan was old enough to understand how the world worked, but young enough to believe in miracles, he began building something, a strange machine made from old metal, abandoned gears, rushed wires, and every scrap he could collect. It didn't look beautiful. It didn't even look like it would function. But Ivan didn't care. To him, the machine was hope given shape. He worked on it day and night, while other boys played in the snow or sat beside their stuffs, even hammered metal, tightened bolts, and scribbled ideas in his notebook. His hands were always dirty, his clothes always dusted with the metal powder, and his mind always racing. He believed that if he could build something that stirred the air, something powerful enough to push the cloud aside, maybe, just maybe, sunlight would find its way through. His machine grew bigger each month. People watched from a distance, shaking their heads or laughing quietly. He's dreaming, they whispered. He's wasting his life. Some even mocked him openly, asking, "Do you think you can fight this guy?" Even never answered. He only worked harder because he wasn't fighting the sky, he was fighting hopelessness. One evening, the machine was finally complete. It stood taller than he was, heavy and clumsy looking, while metal wings that trembled when the wind touched them, and a strange engine silent but full of potential. Ivan stared at it, exhausted but proud. This was years of learning, years of believing, and years of refusing to give up. But the machine couldn't stay in the valley. To work, it needed height. It needed the highest point in the town, the tallest hill. So on a freezing evening, when the sky looked darker than usual, Ivan wrapped a scarf around his neck, tied ropes around the machine, and began dragging it towards the hill. The snow was thick, the air bit into his skin. His breath came out in shaky clouds. His hands shook from the cold and exhaustion. The ropes cut into his palms until they bled. Several times he fell to his knees. Several times he nearly gave up. Halfway up the hill, he looked back at the town below. Not a single window had light. Not a single person stood outside. No one believed in him. No one even knew what he was trying to do. For a moment, the doubt was heavier than the machine. Maybe he is really a foolish boy. Maybe one person couldn't change anything. Maybe the world was simply too heavy for a single pair of hands. He sat in the snow, defeated, trembling from cold and fear. But then, something inside him stayed, a memory, a voice, a whisper from years ago. Even the smallest person can create the biggest change if they never stop trying. He saw his grandmother in his mind, smiling with the same warmth he had been chasing all his life. And that memory lit a fire inside him stronger than any cold world could bring. Ivan stood up. He wiped his tears. He pulled the rope again, step by step, until he reached the top of the hill, breathless and nearly collapsing. The machine stood before him, heavy, silent, and waiting. Ivan touched the switch with the trembling fingers, and the world held its breath. For a moment, nothing happened. The machine stood cold, silent on the snowy hilltop, as if it was too afraid of disappointment. Ivan's heart pounded. His fingers were numb. His breath shook in the icy air, and still he kept his hand on the switch, refusing to let fear win. Then a faint hum whispered through the metal. It grew louder. The machine shuddered. The gears clanged to the life. The metal wings unfolded and stretched like something waking up from a long sleep. A deep vibration spread across the ground, and Ivan stepped back, eyes wide, watching as his invention did exactly what he dreamed of. The air began to move. Not a gentle breeze, not a playful wind, but a strong rising current powerful enough to make the snow whip around him. The sky above, heavy with clouds that have not moved for decades, trembled as the wind pushed against them. Down in the valley, people felt the shift. Windows rattled. Old wooden doors creaked open. The townspeople stepped outside for the first time in the days, confused. Some covered their faces. Some clutched their coats. Others simply stared upward, wondering what had disturbed the sky. Cloud began to twist, groan, stretch apart. Ivan watched, his breath caught in his throat. For a second, he thought the cloud might close again, but they didn't. They continued to separate, slowly at first, then faster. As the machine roared louder, the winds grew stronger. The faint glow appeared behind the darkest cloud, golden, soft, almost shy. The first beam of sunlight cracked through the sky, thin as a thread of light, but bright enough to make Ivan blink. It fell on the snow-covered hilltop, turning everything it touched into glowing gold. Down in the town, a woman gasped as a light brushed her cheek. A man dropped his walking stick. Children pressed their tiny hands against the warm beam spilling across the street. Some of them laughed, some of them cried, some stood frozen, overwhelmed by a warmth they had never felt before. The clouds continued to pull apart until the entire sky blossomed into bright, glowing sunlight. The whole landscape changed like a painting being washed clean. Grey House looked alive again. Frozen soil softened. Snow sparked even instead looking dull and lifeless. Even the mountains seemed to stand taller as if proud of this new beginning. The townspeople didn't know who had caused the miracle. They only felt the joy rising inside them, a feeling of so powerful that it pushed years of sadness aside. But up on the hill, even finally collapsed to his knees. Not from the weakness, but from the relief. The machine continued to hum, steady and strong, even touched its side with a trembling hand, whispering a thank you, not to machine, but to hope that kept him going when no one else did. He stayed there for a minute, letting sunlight warm his face for the first time in his life. It felt gentle and golden, just like the stories he had written in his book all those years. Soon, footsteps approached. A group of people from the town climbed the hill, shield raised over their eyes to block the bright light. At first, they didn't recognize even. But when they realized who had brought the sun back, they looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. A little girl stepped forward. Her voice was small but clear. Did you do this? Even didn't know what to say. His throat tightened. His eyes burned with the tear he didn't even feel. But the girl, she ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, thanking him through the tears. One by one, townspeople came closer. Some apologized for doubting him. Some simply stood there silently, humbled by the sight of the boy who had refused to give up. Others placed gentle hands on his shoulder, not because he needed saving, but because they finally understood the strength he carried, and in that moment, even realized something important. He had not brought sunlight on the sky. He had brought sunlight to their hearts. He had reminded them of something they had forgotten long ago. The world changes not because everyone believes, but because someone believes even when no one else does. As the days passed, the town transformed quickly. Sunlight melted the old sadness that had collected in its corners. Children played outside until their laughter echoed through the streets. Markets opened, doors that had been shut for years swung wide open. People learned to smile again. Flowers began pushing through the softened earth, small and colorful. The first one blossomed outside Evan's house, a tiny yellow flower trembling in the breeze but standing tall, just like him. The townspeople named the hill Sunrise Peak, and the machine became a symbol of what determination could create. Even repaired it, improved it, and taught others how it worked. He shared his notebook, showing the town the vocabulary, diagrams, theories, and the dreams he had collected over the years. For the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. Children sat with him on the hill while he taught them new words like perseverance, innovation, transformation, and resilience. They practiced saying the words out loud, letting them fill their minds the same way sunlight fills the valley. And every evening when the sun dipped behind the mountains, he even looked at the machine and remembered the long, lonely nights he had spent building it, the cuts on his hand, the weight of the doubt he carried, the quiet encouragement of his grandmother's voice. He understood now of why he succeeded. It hadn't been strength. It hadn't been intelligence. It has been the courage to keep trying when everything around him said to stop. The town honored with the celebration, not extravagant, not loud, but filled with genuine gratitude. People lit candles, not because they needed the light, but as a symbol of hope he had brought back. As he stood in the glowing crowd, even realized that the real miracle wasn't the sunlight breaking through the clouds. The real miracle was the way people changed when they believed in something again. And on that night, as he looked at the smiling faces around him, he even felt something brighter than sunlight warms his hand: belonging. He understood at last that the true light he had been searching for was not the sky. It was within the people waiting to be woken up, the same way he had woken up the sky. This was the story. Thank you for listening to this story on English with Apurva. I hope you learned new words, new feelings, and new inspiration. If you enjoyed this episode, like, share, and subscribe for more English learning stories and lessons. Keep learning, keep improving, and keep shining. We will meet in the next video.